the message. This is where we find the hope in the headlines. I am your host, Claudia Allen. This is my chief executive officer. This is the chief financial officer, the manager, the editor, the writer, it gets better every week, folks. This is
mercy.
Carmela Monk Crawford, my partner in crime, my co-host. And this particular episode today, we just want to focus on Black History Month. All right.
Mhm.
You know, we've kind of been talking about a lot of things all month that affect Black people
Mhm.
and that kind of indirectly incorporate, deal with, and celebrate Black people. But for this particular episode, we really wanted to focus on that. And so the best way that I know how to do that is for us to even just kind of think briefly, you know, like, what is Black History Month? Where did Black History Month come from? You know, I don't know if you are aware, but Black History Month was originally known as Negro Week. Carter G. Woodson created Negro Week back in 1926. And even back then, he was dedicated to finding some kind of a thematic focus for the public to focus on and think about, so that we can not just focus on the pain and the trauma of being Black in America, but also be able to kind of celebrate and learn about the contribution. So since 1926, we have had different initiatives that, you know, help us learn about the different Black inventors, right? So that we learned that, you know, like a Black man invented the stoplight, you know, or, you know, we learned that a cell phone was invented by a Black man. The super soaker was invented by a Black man, right? Madam C.J. Walker was the first multi-millionaire, self-made multimillionaire. Yeah. So it's a really beautiful time. But I think what is so interesting is that I'm not sure everyone always is embracing or celebratory of Black History Month. I know growing up, I grew up in predominantly white schools, white religious schools, and there was not a real appreciation or valuing of Black History Month from elementary school really into college. I think in high school that Black History Month presence started to come because I started to create it and I started to fight for it. Or when I got to college, I had a student life dean, who changed Black History Month from being a week to being celebrated actually through the entire month. That was in 2009. And so, you know, I think that we like to think that Black History Month is something that everybody celebrates and everybody engages with, but I feel like for the most part, the month of February like comes and goes, and there really is no real acknowledgement for what Black History Month was meant to be and how it should be engaged. What do you think, Carmela?
Yeah. I definitely agree with you, especially if we've gotten to the point where we are looking at it from a rote kind of trotting out Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King Jr. When we're looking at this as something that is either is not special, it doesn't require further introspection, or revisiting the history, or if we've diluted it so that this is sort of culture month.
Yeah.
And talk about all the different people. And that's something that in our family that is a little pet peeve, because even today, like our child who's still in middle school, they decided to travel to go to the Smithsonian's today.
Oh, wow.
Well, to the museums.
Yeah.
But they didn't go to the African American Museum of History and Culture.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. That's the problem for me, is that they went down and they went to visit the Holocaust Museum and to look at the U.S. Capitol, which says to me right now is, you know, let us pick who we believe is worthy of the honor. And that's when you talk about looking at history, you are acknowledging the worth of somebody's experience.
Right.
And here, as an African American, and it's not to be exclusive, but this is a history that had not been written or not been shared or shared in probably the most negative or traumatic ways possible.
Absolutely.
And so here now they've made the choice. We would rather visit. And by all means, I think we should all go see the Holocaust Museum.
For sure.
Because that is history that we do not want to revisit in the sense of experiencing that again.
Absolutely.
But you have to think about what went on behind that choice.
But I think that's the thing. I feel like society is so comfortable not wanting to forget about the Holocaust. Like we always say, never forget the Holocaust. Forget. We always want to talk about the atrocity that happened, the atrocious, egregious genocide that happened against the Jews during World War II with Hitler and the Nazis. But in the same vein, right? Like there was a genocide that happened on the continent. 15 million Africans were killed prior to the Holocaust. That does not even include the millions of Africans who were enslaved within the transatlantic slave trade, whether that be here in the States, whether that be in the Caribbean, whether that be in South America. Yeah. And so it's not to say, like, I also don't want to get into that game of, like whose trauma is worse? Who had it worse? Are the Jews? Did the Jews have it off worse than Black people? Like, I don't want to get into that, but I think it's a matter of. It's very interesting to me that we are more than willing to revisit and commemorate and honor the death of the Jews in the Holocaust. We have no problem talking about Japanese internment camps. We have no problem, dealing with a lot of these issues. But the moment that the conversation comes up around Black people in this country, we don't want to deal with it. It's a conversation we just don't want to have. And I feel like that's even part of people's not desiring to even talk about Black History Month, because it's like, oh, well, I don't only want to talk about slavery, or like, I don't want to only talk about, Carl McRoy just showed up. So I don't just want to talk about slavery. I don't just want to talk about lynching or whatever other bad things happen. Let's only talk about the good things, right? But, I'm just wondering, should we talk about the bad things that happen? Should we talk about the traumas? Should we talk about these things? Or, should we only talk about the inventions and the Black businesses and, all of the great things that Black people have done in society?
Well, I'd never thought about it. And then now that you ask it, and I'm reading the article that we have. You're probably in a better position. I've read it, but it is way more deep than I expected, where Michael Polite wrote for us. I love the idea that this would be an opportunity for us to revisit the transgenerational trauma.
Yeah.
What is that?
So he provides for us this really great psychological breakdown in this article. You really want to go check it out on our website, where he says, and I'm just going to read what he has here. The unearthing of your transgenerational script begins with you understanding how trauma has impacted and consequently shaped your family history. And so we find the familiar African axiom, you must know where you've been to know where you're going, to have more merit than we might have previously believed. Yeah. We are acting out the hurts, concerns, fears, and abuses experienced by our ancestors, and we cannot fully understand our current trajectory until we come to terms with the previous wounds suffered by our predecessors. This transgenerational script is so accurate that French psychologist Anne Schutzenberger welcomes us to realize ancestral trauma as a phenomenon that tends to play out in our lives at the very age or on the very date of the originating trauma. She calls this the anniversary syndrome. So in essence,
that's some stuff.
That's some stuff.
That's some stuff there.
In essence, my friend is saying to me that there are trauma points, there are triggers, there are experiences that our ancestors have had that we did not experience that are in our genetic code. They are in our DNA. And we are making everyday decisions, acting out our fears, our anxieties, our depression. All of that is intimately attached and connected to the trauma of our ancestors. What you feel?
No, see, I don't know. I don't know.
Tell me.
Here's where I am.
Yeah.
One, I agree that we have learned different behaviors in different everything, whatever your family, my family may have taught each one of us respectively about what our family history has meant and where we fit in this. I come from a long line of very proud, strong people.
Yeah.
And as a monk, this was something that was taught even on my mother's side. We proudly look back at leaders in our family who are leaders in the community, fearless, articulate, intelligent. I can only hope to live up to these kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
But these are the things that we are taught and we've learned and we've experienced that, right? At the same time, we also catch some history or catch some traditions. So if we learn to pass down the recipe, whether it's good for us or bad for us, and that's the big story these days, are we passing down through our family line these bad traditions? The mac and cheese. That is not good for your heart. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Are we passing down? Because that's what we love. So when you talk about learning and teaching and receiving that information, and when you're talking about cultural customs that inform us, that is totally different than what he is talking about there.
Right.
And that's why I was asking you before, how do these traumas how are we infused with these traumas? Because I don't want anybody to, we live in an era when people often, right now, even more refer the influence of the ancestors.
Right.
Praying to the ancestors. You know what I'm saying?
You're saying.
Or
Yes,
the
go
ancestors,
with that.
The ancestors are with us. And there are many people, I don't happen to be one of them.
Yeah.
I don't believe that the cloud of witnesses represents people who have gone on before and are watching from some heavenly place to witness what we're doing. I don't believe that.
Right.
All right. And so I'm wondering, when you're talking about this trauma, is that what you're saying? But it seemed to me that article referenced a DNA stamp.
Yes. Yeah.
And the effects, the physiological effects of this, and which is so deep to me that this has my head spinning.
No, yeah, man. So, and Pastor Polite does not go deep into the science in this particular article. But there are other articles. I know I just found one called "Can We Really Inherit Trauma?" that the New York Times published back in December of 2018. And basically, there is a lot of scientific research going out right now on what they're calling, I've never done this research, they're calling epigenetics.
Okay.
And they are finding that individuals, for example, they did a study on, not in this particular, it is this article. They did a study on the descendants of those who experienced the Holocaust.
Wow. Okay.
So they did genetic code and blood tests, all this study on individuals who were simply descendants. They were not alive. They were nowhere near close to being alive.
Okay.
And
during the Holocaust.
During the actual trauma.
Mm-hmm.
But they found the exact same trauma markers in the body of those who were the descendants of individuals who experienced the trauma. So you never got gassed. You've never been in a concentration camp. You never saw anyone get shot in the head. You never experienced any of that, for yourself. But you carry the genetic markers of those that experience that trauma. And so, the argument that scientists are making is that because you are carrying those genetic markers, you are subconsciously making decisions based on fears, anxieties, beliefs, cares and concerns that are all triggered by things in your genetic makeup that you had absolutely no control over and no one-to-one experience with.
Wow.
And so they have done this research on Holocaust descendants. They have not done this research on the descendants of slaves. And so it then behooves, it immediately causes us to think, particularly during a time like Black History Month, that if we are the descendants of individuals who were stolen from their land, forced to not allow to speak their language, practice their religion. If you have a baby, your baby is ripped from you and sold to another plantation. You are not allowed to get married. You are whipped and beaten just for looking at somebody. You are raped. You are being held on breeding camps to, bear children for these plantation masters, right? It's like, there's just like all of these egregious atrocities that happened during slavery. And it makes me wonder, as Pastor Polite did in the article, what subconscious behaviors are we performing and doing that are attached to the brokenness and trauma of our ancestors, things that we potentially did not experience, but because they didn't properly process it, we're not properly processing and dealing with it. We are perpetuating, generational traumas, generational curses, because we're not dealing with this stuff. And what if Black History Month became a time that was not exclusively about learning who invented what and celebrating many of the sacrifices and contributions of many of our Black leaders and activists and thinkers and organizers. But what if it became a time where we truly sat and reflected introspectively and tried to figure out, wait a minute, why do I do what I do? Right? Like, even like as I'm sitting here, like, my family might get upset, but it's okay. So trouble. My grandmother's father died days, weeks, months after her birth. She never met him. She has photos of him. He's a very well-dressed, very tall man. They claim to not know the details around his death. They were living in Georgia at the time. My grandmother's uncle was in Detroit. The moment that he died, and this is her mother's brother, the moment that he died, my uncle sent for my grandmother and her mother, and they immediately moved to Detroit. Now, those are the only details of the story. All I'm saying is,
gotcha.
And we have said that, I have said this, at least to my mom or to my brother, it sounds a little fishy. You know what I mean? So it's like, we can't, I can't confidently come out and say the KKK did whatever, or some white man did whatever. But there is...
You don't know.
We don't know.
Right.
But there is something
that's there. But the question is, Claudia, how do you think that was passed down through your veins? How does that inform your choices and what you do?
Yeah.
Or the risks that you take?
Yeah.
Or do you all even go to Georgia? You know what I'm saying? You know how some people have that in there, we don't go. We just don't.
So I do have, like, my grandmother is very much so, I'm not from the South, I'm from Detroit. She wants absolutely nothing to do with Georgia like that. I know my mother is very much so like, I refuse to live below the Mason-Dixon line. Have no intention of ever living below the Mason-Dixon line. I think for me, I have a very militant approach to protecting and preserving Black people.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not raised like that.
Okay.
I wasn't given that. So I was not raised in an incubator where, you know, my mother and father sat me down and said, you are to grow up
and you are to fight
and fight for the equality of our people, activate our, like, we weren't raised like that. Like, if you were to meet myself and my brother, we are two very different people. And so if you met any of my cousins, like, I mean, like, everyone in the family is very conscious, very woke, but I think I'm probably the only one that is this actively engaged. And there's a part of me that feels like I have always felt this burden. Like I felt this like internal fire towards the cause that was not beaten over the head.
Okay.
And so like there's a part of me that feels like there is something in me that's like pushing and driving me to care this much, because I've never been pulled over by the police. I have never been beaten by a police officer. I have never, like, there are some very pointed race-based traumas that I have not on the one-on-one experienced. I have been followed in stores by white people. I've never been called the N-word. I've never been called out of my name. Not knowingly, I've never consciously been denied an opportunity or something because of my race or gender. But my mother has. Yeah. My grandmother has. My aunt has. They all have stories for days. And so it just begs the question, is the fire coming from something that's in my genetic code, or is the fire coming from the fact that they told me all the stories?
Right. And it sounds like it's probably both, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I'm just going back to what you're saying about, you know, Black History Month. If we, you know, if it's more than the inventors and things like this, if it's a time to sit down and reflect, and to discuss, I think for a wider community that's not, you know, not just Black folks, this is an opportunity to think about those systems that are in place. That were put there because of this deep divide in our country. Yeah. And to question reality and to question assumptions. Yeah. Right? This is a time that we can do that. Yeah. And so rather than burying the discomfort, you know, this is a time, you know, because what I'm hearing you say is that we could all be, for me, you know, we often wonder why when I watch some of this stuff, you know, I always hear people, I'm not watching that. It's just going to make me mad. But that it makes sense that on some level, this is triggering something. Right. And it's not just what I've been taught. I'm connected. That person is like me, and something on the inside is sensitive to this narrative. Yeah. Something on the inside is reacting to that. Both of those museums I just mentioned, you know, the African American Museum of History and Culture. I always say the name wrong. You got it. They have that space where the water is rolling down, and they have the quote, you know. Where you're supposed, after you tour the museum, you come in, you sit down, and you reflect. The same thing for the Holocaust Museum. You go through all that trauma, and you sit down in there while the candles are flickering, and you take a moment to process. Whether that means for you weep, or whatever it is a time for repair. And I think sometimes spiritual people, religious people, maybe we don't take that kind of time and that kind of space seriously. Yeah. But perhaps to come away and sit down and say, you know, and I'm good for this. Yeah. I'm one of those kind of people. I went down to Montgomery, we did the interview with Brian Stevenson year before last. And then we went to his legacy museum that traces what lynching, where did this come from, and how this is a straight line from slavery all the way to today in mass incarceration. You go through this thing, and it's a U-shaped museum. And it starts out with sort of these film images, almost like a hologram images of what is supposed to be like enslaved women singing spirituals and things like that. And so you start out there and it does something to your heart in the beginning. You know what I mean? So from all the way through, by the time you come out here, the people that I was with were moved to tears.
Wow.
I'm one of these people being journalist, whatever, I'm like, I'm going down here and I'm taking pictures of them with their tears. Right. What kind of insensitivity is that? But I'm not dealing with it in the moment. These are my people. People who look like me.
Yeah.
People in my community. That has to do something to you on the inside.
But I don't think it's so much that. I think that we as a people, I think it's a defense mechanism. Mm-hmm. I think that we like to intellectualize things. I think that's what we've done with Black History Month. Like, we've made it a month of facts and figures, so that we don't have to process the emotions that are attached to a lot of that pain and trauma.
Very interesting.
I can compartmentalize this so that I don't have to feel it in a certain way. I can just simply like consume the information. But it's like when you do what you're talking about, and you're really stopping and you're contemplating and you're feeling. Like, I think the first time that I went to the African American Smithsonian, and they have pieces of a slave ship and like actual chains. Like, I didn't cry, but like I took a second.
Okay.
But I had to be very intentional because I felt myself wanting to rush through it. So it's like, it was very easy to come and be like, oh, something like that. Like, okay, information taken, go to the information taken, go to the, and like, I remember actively having to tell myself like, okay, no, like just stay here for a minute. Be in here for a minute. Like, mentally be present for what's happening here. I mean, even, and as you were talking, the other thing came to my mind too. My mom absolutely loves World War II stuff. Like, she loves reading about the Holocaust, the Jews. She feels like that was a gross atrocity. Like, she just loves the history around that, loves watching World War II movies. Like,
she wants to know about it.
She consumes everything she can about that stuff. Come to find out, like, down the line, the white people that are in our bloodline are Jewish.
Interesting.
We didn't find this out until, I'd say, maybe 10 years ago now. And so for her, we were like, but we didn't read anything like this, but she was like, oh, maybe this is why I care so much about World War II stuff. I didn't know that because we've got Jewish people in our blood. And so it's like, it's something to think about that. Like, if you have, like, what if you are a Black person that has the trauma points of the Holocaust and American slavery
that's too much.
In your DNA?
That's too much.
Simultaneously. Like, you got some stuff you need to
you have to deal with.
Deal with.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, we a few months ago, not a few months ago, it was last month, in January of this year. Our people here, our producers are like, would you please give us?
Yeah.
In January this year, we went for Martin Luther King Day or one of those days, we went down to the did I say this before? The War, the African American Civil War Museum.
Yeah.
When you come to Washington, there's always so much that you can do. And, we have a whole list of stuff that we want to go and see and do. Yeah. So we decided we're going to go down here. Now, a few years ago, a man that I met, Alvin Singleton, I'll say his name, he loves doing genealogy. He didn't even say, hey, Carmela, he just asked me if I knew about my family. It's like, no, not really. He took it upon himself. He's not even a member of the family.
Yeah.
But he went and he traced our family tree.
Wow.
Come to find out.
Amazing.
We had an ancestor that fought in the Civil War with the Union Army.
That's amazing.
Now, see, as a child, I never was anywhere close to anything in the history book.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying? That people can't trace our line to the George Washingtons, nobody can trace it because we didn't have access to that.
Absolutely.
This changes this because now I can go back and see my ancestor at the base of a statue,
Mercy.
a historical statue.
Wow.
You understand what I mean? So we go in there, and I went to the front desk. The director of this museum happened to be there that day.
Yeah.
And he said, go ahead, sign in. And I told him the name. They sent me back a beautiful certificate that says your ancestor was with this unit.
Wow.
This is where this unit was organized. This is where they left from in Philadelphia.
Wow.
This is where they fought. And this is just to certify that he was a part of the Civil War. And at the bottom, it was so beautiful because it said he fought to save a country that was split. And he fought to save, it was a very moving kind of contribution that African Americans have been marginalized from.
Wow.
Heretofore, the contribution is what has happened as a slave. When you had here is a person, and that for me is another story that coincides with that. While I was there, we saw a beautiful picture of this young boy. They call him Drummer Jackson. Anybody looking at this, go look it up. Amazing. Yeah. This boy, they have a before and after of Drummer Jackson, 15-year-old boy who escaped the plantation in Louisiana to run away and help fight for freedom with the Union troops.
Wow.
They show his picture, and his clothes, they're being held together by threads. Wow. He was so committed to being a part of this. And he comes there to fight. In the next picture, you have him there, beautiful face, little curly hair. He's got the dignified helmet or hat of the drum major shirt, sash, his drum, and his uniform. Because not only is he, somebody who is escaping slavery, now he's fighting. Wow. And he's there to help the general signal the troops so that they can be successful on the battlefield. Wow. These are the kinds of, not only is this Black history triggering to us, but the tremendous sense of relief, belonging, the interaction in the destiny of the world around us. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. We're not a part of that. Yeah. But when you study and you see that you are integral. Why can't I say the word now? But when you are integral to what is happening, it changes you on the inside.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
I told my cousin, it was like, they trace back our history, and, and on one side of the family, there's no record of enslavement he could find back into at least the 1780s. The same.
Wow.
And I told my cousin,
y'all was free Blacks.
My cousin,
let's go.
He said, every meeting now, talking about how the story still goes on, even today, I'm free, Jack. Don't tell me nothing.
Yeah.
This is what it does for you to know your history.
Yeah.
Like, no, that's who we are.
Yeah.
That is who we are. So I never thought about Black history from the perspective that Michael Polite and these other articles are talking about. I've never thought about it.
Never.
But
I have always loved preaching, always loved the word, even though I've always gone in a different direction. And then come to find out, my grandmother gave me my grandfather's father, so my great-grandfather's obituary. It was a newspaper. Come to find out, he was a Baptist preacher in Chester, Pennsylvania.
Wild.
Like, stuff that just like doesn't, and it's like, it's so interesting. It's like the more you talk to family members and like you hear stories of people and what people did and how they maneuvered, you see so many similarities. It's scary. And it's almost like, oh man, like
the recurring themes that are happening through the family. Now, see, it's funny that you say that, because we discovered not too long ago that in our family, like my father had been the editor of Message magazine years ago.
Yeah.
But a century before him, We have a great uncle who was a Black newspaper editor.
Really?
And an AME preacher.
Wow.
Did we know about him? No. We didn't.
Amazing.
But so
That's
I guess
amazing.
I'm saying, I'm trying not to be so mystical about this. I don't want this to come off as being mystical.
Yeah.
But I do believe that it is very interesting.
Yeah.
How these things, and I now we know there's some stuff that has to be addressed. And so maybe we're going through and we can do some more in-depth reading.
Yeah.
Searching and sitting down with the family members to find out what's going on.
Yeah.
Like, why do I get triggered by this?
That's good. Yeah. Maybe, maybe Black History Month isn't just about, learning about like general Black history contributions. Mm-hmm. What if we took the time to learn about our own familial history?
Yeah.
And things like that. And like you're saying, just to be clear, we're not talking about ancestral religion. We're not talking about spiritualism. We're not dealing with any of the communicating or channeling the ancestors. That is not our conversation at all. Mm-hmm. We are talking about the very current scientific psychological research currently that is around epigenetics and transgenerational trauma, and the potential reality that regardless of race, regardless of gender, we all are carrying trauma points, trauma triggers in our blood from our ancestors, from our family members, people we have never met and experiences we have never had. Wow. And we are living out those fears and concerns and anxieties, as Polite put it. It's just like so fascinating to me. And so Black History Month, I think, is an important month. And I think we're this particular week, when you watch this episode for the first time, there would have been articles posted throughout the week talking about what Black history means to me. And also thinking through what is Black history for different people groups, right? What is Black History Month for? We know what Black History Month is for an African American. We've just had that conversation here. But what is Black History Month for an African who immigrated to America? What is Black History Month for a Caribbean who immigrated to America? What is Black History Month to an Afro-Latina? What is Black History Month to these four groups who are representatives of the diaspora, who have all experienced the trauma of the transatlantic slave trade, the Middle Passage, plantations, whippings, lynchings. They have all experienced many of the same things we have, just at different levels and in a different location. Right. And so the question is, what does Black History Month mean to these individuals, as well as a conversation that we want to have? And so we just want to encourage you to follow us on social media. Make sure that you like us on Facebook. Make sure that you are following us on Instagram and Twitter at Message1898, and make sure that you are subscribed to the magazine. Make sure that you go to www.messagemagazine.com, subscribe to the print issue, but you can also subscribe to our newsletter on the website.
Say something about that too?
Go.
When we talk about history, that's why it's Message 1898. That's when Message came around.
Oh, tell them, Carmela.
1898. We are, and people say this all the time, but I think we forget the relevancy of having the ongoing platform and voice, that deals with African American issues, or even the wider diaspora, right? People take that for granted. I don't think it should be taken for granted. And you can go, when you subscribe to the magazine and you go online, there's a special added feature, and we need to make sure that people know about that by the time this comes out, is Message Vault. Because Message goes back, we've been publishing under the name Message Magazine since the 1930s, 1934. Wow. But you can go back all the way to 1934 and look at Message Magazine every time it came out. And
Yeah.
so we're hoping that you can access that if you go ahead and subscribe. Anyway,
Absolutely. No. That was good. That's good information. That's what we want to know. I mean, and even Carmela, why don't you just tell them in the last few minutes? Why don't you just tell them the story of Message Magazine? Man, that's such a great.
What is beautiful? Let me say, I can't give you all the story and all the details, but I can say this, because we have Seventh-day Adventist roots.
Yeah.
Right. And those Seventh-day Adventist roots we share with with a HBCU, which would be Oakwood University.
Absolutely.
And back in the 1800s, Adventist people, in particular, one man by the name of James Edson White, got together with several other people, including a black shipman. They built their own steamboat, Claudia.
Wow.
With the express purpose of taking and putting that steamboat on the water down the Mississippi, down through many communities, Vicksburg, and so other communities all the way down through the South. And with the express purpose of being able to stop, dock, get off, talk to people, talk to them about Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful and.
Yeah.
Share with them skills that needs. And so if you're talking that first generation after emancipation, a lot of people were in dire need.
Yeah.
And so they would offer school at night for the adults, school during the day for children.
Wow.
And 2 publications that supported and were in and around this ministry back then, which was a multicultural and multiracial ministry. But the 2 publications that came out of that were the Gospel Herald, right? And the Gospel Primer. The Gospel Primer would teach children to read using biblical references.
Wow.
A is for angel. And that's not uncommon. It was not uncommon for that time, but that's what they were doing as well.
Yeah.
Then you had the Gospel Herald that would also, like Message Magazine today, give the word of God, the gospel, and talk about what is happening in the ministry. So here we are all these years later. Message Magazine, 1898 to 2020 is, wow.
That's amazing.
How many years is that? I don't know.
I can't count.
So,
it's too many. But
it was
it's
120, awesome. So we're like 122 years now.
That's
122
amazing.
years old. And so we are here, and we're going to be here.
Yeah.
And so, that's the story of Message Magazine. One day we'll talk about more. I know we got some projects coming. We can talk about it. But that's who we are, and that Black history is alive and well. And the beauty, I think one wrinkle to this is the beauty of those roots, those Adventist roots that went beyond color. It was something that, that's the thing is there has to be an interest. This might not be your history, but I see the value of you, and I see what has happened to you. I'm partnering with you to do something different.
Wow, that's good. I feel like that's what Black History Month is.
Yeah,
that's what Black History Month is. It's about taking the time. Let's support Black businesses. Let's read Black literature. Let's understand our Black history. Let's do all of this stuff. Let's also continue to learn about the contributions and the inventions, but let's also be reflective. Let's be contemplative. Let's think about the experiences and traumas that have happened in our own families, and let's figure out how we can break those generational curses and traumas and create something new. Yes. Something new and something better. That's what we do here at Message. We're all about trying to put together the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the message of, what's going out in the world. That's what this podcast is about. It's about finding the hope in the headlines. It's about continuing to do what we do for our communities, for our families, just for the world at large, just to make the world a better place. Try to bring that light, that salt that Carmela often travels around talking to different people about all the time. That's what Message Magazine is about. That's what Black History Month is about. So we pray that you had a great Black History Month celebration this month, this year.
Let us know about it. Yeah.
Let us know about it. Comment. Let us know how you celebrated. How did you teach your kids and engage with your kids and your families to celebrate and honor this really amazing month Thanks so much for joining us. Until next time, we will see you.